Dry Hollow lay stretched like a tired whisper across the sun-cracked plains of the American frontier. The wind carried dust and memory through the canyons, where old bones of cattle bleached under the sun, and the sky watched with an indifference only nature could afford. In that faded town, where hope seemed to dry up quicker than creek beds in July, Ezekiel Hart's ranch sagged under the weight of time, loss, and 3 small children who no longer laughed. Ezekiel moved through his days with the quiet persistence of a man whose world had gone still. His boots, worn to the shape of his grief, dragged across the warped porch each morning as he watched the horizon, waiting for nothing and fearing everything. His hands, once strong enough to break a wild horse, now trembled when they buttoned his shirt or brushed the hair from his daughter's tired eyes. He didn't talk much, not to neighbors, not to God, and not even to the grave out back where his wife, Clara, rested beneath the last blooming rose bush she'd planted before the blood came too fast and the baby never cried. Millie, the eldest, had taken to silence like her father. She wore her mother's shawl even when it wasn't cold, wrapped tight as if it could keep the world from slipping further away. She fed the chickens, dressed her brothers, and folded laundry with a sternness far too heavy for 11 years. Isaac, 7, asked too many questions with eyes too wide, and Tommy, just 5, barely spoke at all. He still waited by the barn gate some days, looking for the mother who had said she'd be back after the baby came. The ranch, once full of Clara's singing and the clatter of dinner pots, now only echoed with creaking boards and the occasional lowing of cattle that didn't know they were next for sale. Ezekiel had sold 2 horses and the last of the seed wheat. There was no time to think, only to survive. It was while cleaning out the storage trunk that he found the catalog, dust-coated and frayed at the corners. It lay beneath Clara's wedding dress, folded carefully in linen that had yellowed with years. Mail-order brides from Tennessee to Maine stared up from faded pages, smiles painted and hollow. He flipped through without much thought until he saw her name, Annabelle Cross, 36, strong moral character, God-fearing, skilled in homemaking, teaching, and tending animals, unable to bear children, but open-hearted and kind. A single sentence, previously rejected due to barrenness, sat like a branding iron at the bottom of the page. Ezekiel stared at it for a long time, as if the words themselves might shift, soften. He wasn't looking for more children. He was looking for a mother his children could remember loving. That night, after the children were asleep, he sat by lamplight and penned a letter, hands stiff and unsure. He didn't promise love or joy. He simply offered shelter, food, and the company of a family that needed holding together. Weeks passed, then months. The wind rolled on. The ranch leaned harder into the earth. Ezekiel had almost forgotten the letter when word came by Stage Depot. A woman named Annabelle Cross would be arriving on the Tuesday coach. The town gathered, as they always did when something new came rolling in. Dry Hollow didn't have theater or parades. What it had were arrivals and gossip. And this one, they said, was strange. What kind of woman would marry a man she'd never met, take on 3 children not her own, and move to a ranch one good storm from collapse? The coach kicked up a cloud as it rumbled to a stop. She stepped out alone, no trunk, just one brown satchel and a wide-brimmed hat tugged low over determined eyes. She wasn't young, nor beautiful in the way the girls in the saloon tried to be. Her cheeks were lean, her hands red with work already done somewhere else. But she stood straight, unafraid, and when Ezekiel tipped his hat, she met his eyes without flinching. "Mr. Hart," she said. "Miss Cross," he replied, voice rough as gravel. They rode in silence to the ranch. The children waited on the porch, Millie's arms folded like a sentinel. Annabelle greeted them all by name, though no one had introduced her. Millie offered a curt nod. Isaac hid behind the post. Tommy stared at her boots. The house smelled of wood smoke and loneliness. Ezekiel showed her to a small room off the kitchen. She unpacked quietly, washed her hands, and began chopping vegetables without asking where things were. That evening, they ate stew in silence. She said grace, though no one had asked. She tucked the boys in, reading from a battered Bible in a voice that didn't waver when Tommy clutched her sleeve. The days unfolded in odd quiet. She mended shirts, patched fences, made soap from tallow and lye. The barn was cleaner. So were the children. The chickens laid again. Millie stayed distant, watching like a hawk, uncertain whether Annabelle was here to steal or stay. At the general store, whispers floated like smoke. She can't have kids, they say. What's she doing with 3 already? Strange choice, him bringing her here. Guess beggars can't be choosers. Annabelle never answered them. She bought flour and thread and walked back up the hill with her head high. When Ezekiel asked if she was settling in all right, she simply nodded. It's no colder than Vermont, she said. Just different kinds of silence. One evening, Tommy ran into the house with a wild look in his eyes. Snake, he whispered, pointing. By the coop. Ezekiel reached for his rifle, but Annabelle was already moving. She stepped out onto the porch, lifted her skirt slightly, and pulled a small silver derringer from a leather holster strapped to her calf. One shot clean. The rattlesnake curled like a question mark and died without fanfare. She reloaded the pistol without comment and went back to stirring the beans. Later, Ezekiel asked about the gun. She said her father had taught her. He hunted men for money. I learned enough to stay alive. That night, the sheriff came by, spitting tobacco into the dry weeds. You heard about the Harlan brothers? Ezekiel nodded. Too many times. They hit Carson Ranch, took horses, coin, and left one man hanging. They're coming south. The children didn't need to hear it, but they listened from the stairs anyway. Annabelle's face didn't change. How many? 3. Mean bastards. Royce Harlan leads them. Big name, bad blood. You might want to send your family away. Ezekiel looked to Annabelle. Her fingers tightened around the hem of her apron. We'll be ready, she said. After the sheriff left, Ezekiel poured her a cup of coffee, hands shaking just a little. You know what you're doing. She nodded, looking past the flame of the lantern to where the boys slept in peace. I didn't come here to run. Outside, the wind picked up again, whispering secrets to the stars. Ezekiel leaned against the doorframe, watching Annabelle clear the table like she'd always belonged there. He didn't love her. Not yet. But something deeper than love was beginning to take root. Trust, like a seed finding soil again. And in the stillness of the coming dark, with danger hanging somewhere out beyond the canyon, he whispered a quiet truth he hadn't dared speak in months. Thank you for coming. Annabelle looked up, and for the first time since she'd arrived, she smiled. The wind carried whispers through Dry Hollow like a warning. Clouds built heavy on the horizon, stacking like lead bricks above the jagged ridges. In the Hart household, unease settled deeper than dust in the floorboards. Millie had taken to watching Annabelle with sharp, unblinking eyes, her silence colder than the coming rain. Each gesture Annabelle made, smoothing Tommy's hair, humming softly as she kneaded dough, was met with flinching suspicion. One morning, as the hens clucked restlessly, Millie slammed down a basket of eggs hard enough to crack one. You're not my mama, she muttered. Annabelle didn't flinch. She simply wiped the mess with a cloth and said softly, I don't aim to replace anyone. Just trying to be useful. Millie didn't answer. She just walked out and didn't come back until after sundown. Ezekiel noticed. He wasn't a man of many words, but he saw how Millie's shoulders tensed when Annabelle entered a room, how she lingered longer near Clara's grave, lips moving in soundless conversation. One evening, as the lantern flickered low, he sat across from Annabelle at the kitchen table and watched the way her hands moved, steady, deliberate. You've been patient, he said finally. She didn't look up. Children don't trust easy when they've been forced to grow too fast. He nodded, rubbing a calloused thumb over the rim of his cup. She blames you. I know, she said. But someday, maybe she'll see I'm not trying to take her mother's place. I just always wanted to belong somewhere. That night, Annabelle told him about a man back east. She'd loved him once, believed he'd marry her, but when the doctors told her children would never come, his affection cooled like dying embers. He said he wanted legacy, she whispered. I wanted love. Seems we both went without. Ezekiel didn't speak for a long time. When he finally did, his voice was quieter than the creak of the old rocking chair. Well, he said, You've got 3 who need it now. Legacy or not. A week later, fire lit the sky 10 miles north. Word came fast. Carson Ranch had been hit, burned to the foundation. 1 man strung up, 2 women taken. The rest scattered like leaves in a windstorm. They're headed south, the sheriff warned. Dry Hollows next. Ezekiel stood on his porch with the rifle resting in his arms, the sun painting him in the shape of a man bracing for loss. We need to get you and the children out, he told Annabelle. She folded the laundry without pausing. And where would we run that they wouldn't find us? He frowned. You'd be safer in town. She shook her head. I didn't come here to hide, Ezekiel. I came to make a home. You think Clara would have run? No, he said softly. She wouldn't have. The air grew heavier by the day. Lightning stalked the hills, like a restless spirit. The children slept fitfully. Annabelle cleaned her derringer every night, eyes distant, lips pressed thin. On the 3rd night, a rattlesnake coiled beneath the porch steps. Isaac screamed. Annabelle had it dead before anyone else even moved. You've done this before, Ezekiel said after, staring at the lifeless coil. She met his gaze. My father hunted men, not animals. He said the skill was the same. You just have to look him in the eye. It was late when the storm broke. Thunder rolled in like war drums. Rain lashed the windows. The wind screamed through the canyon, and in the distance, horses neighed and hooves thundered on wet earth. Ezekiel stepped out with his rifle and barely made it 10 yards before the first shot rang out. Pain bloomed in his shoulder, fire tearing through bone. He hit the mud hard, blood soaking into the earth. Annabelle dragged him inside with a strength that surprised even her. Millie screamed. Tommy cried. Lightning lit the sky like the wrath of God. They're here, Ezekiel hissed, clutching his wound. Yet the children, hide them. She didn't hesitate. She shoved the boys into the root cellar and pushed Millie in after them. Stay quiet, she said. No matter what you hear. Millie's eyes were wide with fear and something else, regret. Please, Annabelle whispered, brushing hair from the girl's face. Take care of them if I don't come back. Then she barred the door. The house creaked under the weight of footsteps. Shadows passed by the windows. The storm covered most sounds, but not the voice that rang clear through the front door. Ezekiel Hart, it called. We've come for what's owed. Annabelle crouched near the front, soaked, heart pounding like a war drum. She recognized that voice. Royce Harlan. She pulled a rope across the hallway, just high enough to trip, and dragged a pot of boiling water from the hearth. She set her traps like she'd watched her father do when he hunted men in the mountains of Montana. The first outlaw burst through the front, wild-eyed and soaked to the bone. His boot caught the rope. He fell hard, and scalding water met his face. He screamed and thrashed, firing a wild shot into the wall before Annabelle shot him clean through the chest. The second came in the back. She'd left a trail of broken glass on the floor, knowing his boots would give him away. She waited, heart hammering, breath steady. His silhouette passed the hallway. She stepped out and fired once. The window behind him shattered. He collapsed. Then it was quiet, until Royce kicked in the front door. He moved with the confidence of a man who'd killed too often to care. His beard was slick with rain, eyes gleaming beneath his hat brim. Well, well, he drawled. Where's your man? Bleeding out somewhere. Annabelle raised her pistol, but Royce didn't flinch. You ain't gonna shoot me, girl. You're scared. I can see it. She took one step forward. I'm not scared. He sneered. You think I don't know who you are? I know who you are, she said, voice low. He cocked his head. I'm Annabelle Cross, she said. Daughter of Thomas Cross, the man who put your brother 6 feet down in Missouri. For a heartbeat, Royce froze. Recognition flickered in his eyes, then fury. You got his blood in you, he growled. I got his aim too. He lunged. Time folded into itself. Rain pounded. Thunder cracked. Her fingers squeezed the trigger. One shot. Royce jerked back as if yanked by God himself. Then he crumpled. Annabelle stood there, drenched, the derringer trembling in her grip. The smell of gunpowder hung heavy in the air, mixing with blood and rain and fear. Footsteps thundered behind her, Ezekiel, half limping, his face pale, wrapped in torn cloth and pain. He saw the bodies. He saw her standing. "You all right?" he rasped. She nodded slowly. "They won't hurt the children." From beneath the floorboards, Millie's voice echoed. "Mama." Annabelle turned. Her mouth quivered. For the first time in her life, she didn't know what to say. She opened the cellar door and reached down. Millie's arms wrapped around her waist, tight and trembling. "You came back," the girl whispered. "I said I would." Outside, the rain slowed. Inside, the fire flickered gently again. The storm had passed, and for the first time, the house felt full. The sun crept over the horizon with a softness that didn't belong to places like Dry Hollow. Smoke still curled from the charred beams of the barn, mingling with the morning mist that clung to the hills like old memories. The ranch was broken, shattered porch railings, blood-stained soil, and the bullet-scarred door left swinging in the breeze. But the children were safe, alive, and in Annabelle's arms. By noon, riders came, the sheriff and half the town trailing behind him like buzzards. Word had traveled faster than the rain could wash the blood from the earth. They dismounted in silence, eyes wide at the sight of the carnage. 3 dead men, weapons scattered, and the widow's house still standing. Annabelle met them with the same composure she'd worn since the day she arrived, though her dress was torn and her face was pale with exhaustion. The derringer was still in her hand. The children stood behind her like shadows, clutching at her skirt, unafraid. The sheriff cleared his throat, hat clutched in hand. "Ma'am, they say you're the one who did this." Annabelle didn't answer. "Is it true?" She glanced at the children. Tommy was staring up at her like she'd parted the clouds. Isaac held onto her arm like it was the only sure thing left in the world. Millie stood still, lips pressed tight, something unreadable behind her eyes. "Yes," Annabelle said. "It's true." Murmurs rippled through the onlookers. The sheriff spat into the dirt and gave a low whistle. "Well," he said, "I'll be damned." And just like that, the legend began. That barren bride killed the Harlan brothers. They whispered. All 3 of them. Alone. Ezekiel spent 3 weeks in bed, feverish and half-conscious. The bullet had torn through muscle and lodged near the bone, and the doctor said it was a miracle he was breathing at all. Annabelle never left his side. She cleaned his wounds, read aloud from the Bible, and wiped his brow when the shaking got bad. She didn't cry. Not once. But sometimes, when she thought no one was looking, she sat beside the stove with her hands trembling in her lap. The children didn't speak of that night, not even among themselves. But they stuck to Annabelle like vines to an old oak. Tommy took to sleeping curled beside her blanket on the floor. Isaac followed her into the garden every morning, asking questions she always answered with patience. Even Millie, though she still wore her mother's shawl, began lingering in the doorway when Annabelle told stories over supper. Life didn't return to normal. It reshaped. The ranch healed slowly. Ezekiel's strength came back with the spring grass, though he walked with a limp now and winced when the wind blew cold. He watched Annabelle from the porch, saw the way she moved through the house like she'd always belonged there, humming as she sewed buttons, teaching the boys their letters with a patient smile. He'd never said the words, not since the night he wrote that letter. But each time he looked at her, the truth pressed closer. She had saved them all. One crisp morning, Millie sat on the porch steps, braiding daisy stems into a ring. Annabelle stood nearby, rolling dough for biscuits on the wooden table she'd scrubbed so many times the varnish had worn clean off. The boys were in the yard, shouting about a toad they'd caught. Millie didn't look up when she spoke. "Tommy read me a page from the Psalms yesterday." Annabelle nodded, brushing flour from her palms. "He's doing real well. He said you helped him sound out the hard parts." "I did." Millie was quiet a long moment. The breeze lifted her hair, and for once, she didn't brush it away. "You didn't have to stay," she said. "But you did." Annabelle's hand stilled. "I thought if I hated you enough," Millie continued, voice trembling, "I'd forget how much it hurt to not have Mama anymore." Annabelle turned slowly. Her eyes were soft, unsure. "You don't have to like me, Millie," she said, "but I'll never stop trying to be someone you can count on." Millie stood, the daisy chain clutched in her fingers. She stepped forward, hesitated, then reached up and placed a ring of flowers on Annabelle's head. "I do like you," she whispered. "I think Mama would have liked you too." Then, quieter than a breath, she added, "Mom." The word hung in the air like a prayer finally spoken. Annabelle's throat tightened. Her hands came up, unsure, then folded the girl into her arms, flower and daisies and all. Ezekiel watched from the porch, unseen. His heart ached with something bright, not the sharp pain of loss, something new, something healing. In the ruins of what had once been, a family was forming, thread by thread. Seasons passed. The ranch came back to life. New fence posts were hammered in. A fresh coat of white paint kissed the sides of the house. Calves were born in spring mud, and wildflowers returned to the fields where blood once soaked. The story of Annabelle Hart, née Cross, traveled farther than the town line. Folks rode in from other counties just to glimpse the woman who'd gunned down 3 outlaws and stitched a broken family back together. Some came to ask her how she did it. She never said much. She just smiled and went back to her work. They say she came from nowhere, a woman no one wanted. But in Dry Hollow, she found a home and a family that chose her. And when the devil rode in with dust and thunder, it was that unwanted bride who stood her ground. Not every mother is born. Some are made in fire and love and lead.